All right, just a couple of introductory slides before we get into our sum and substance. As most of you know, and I just alluded again, I lost my own home in the 2003 Cedar Fire in California, which is how I came to be here with you tonight. So I've walked this journey, and I feel for all of you. About UP, United Policyholders, is a nonprofit charity, a 501c3 organization dedicated to educating consumers about their insurance rights, just trying to level the playing field. Offering a lot of consumer-oriented information. Most of our work is done by volunteers. The organization has experience in disaster recovery spanning back more than 20 years. I want to definitely thank, again, the commissioners, County of El Paso. Commissioner Littleton right there, I'm going to turn the mic over to you in a second to do the official welcome. Commissioner Glenn, who is right, there he is, as always. Thank you so much for being here. Commissioner Clark, and our Waldo Canyon Fire Survivor volunteers, Carrie, who's just up here, Steve, who's going to be sharing some information later, Carla, who's going to be handling the microphone, Dawn, Masami, again, a wonderful community of Waldo Canyon Fire Survivors here supporting you, so we thank them and are very appreciative of them. Our fine print, as usual, again, all this information is just offered for general education purposes. Free recovery resources from United Policyholders. Again, I always like to repeat, most of you I think are aware of these, but in case we get some newbies in the crowd, just make sure everybody knows that they have access to these. Again, on the web, www.uphelp.org. Again, guides, samples, links to helpful, other organizations. It's really just offers, it's like a treasure trove of insurance recovery information, although most people probably wouldn't call that a treasure trove. But anyways, I'm just saying, for us here, it's a treasure trove of information. So I encourage you to use it if you haven't accessed it yet. Our Ask an Expert forum, again, free to use. You just go on and register. If you have any sort of question, you can direct it to an attorney, to a professional claims handle, a previous catastrophic loss survivor like myself. Whoever you direct the question to, they don't see your information, but when you get the response back, you see theirs. So it's nice, it protects your anonymity, but then if you want to follow up with the person who answered, you have the ability to do that. Our book, our little yellow book, the Disaster Recovery Handbook, again, kind of like the Disaster Recovery Primer right there. Our recovery flash drive, very on point with our topic tonight on the contents. All sorts of contents related information, sample depreciation guide, sample completed inventory you can use as a memory jogger, depreciation basics, again, very useful tool, and of course the organizer that you can use as a claims diary, keeping business cards, etc. If you haven't gotten any of those, again, just email. You can go on the website, direct an email from the website, to get any of these free recovery tools. Our Disaster Survivor Support Network, again, all you have to do is email our organization and we will hook you up with one of our volunteers. We've got over 160 previous catastrophic loss survivors like myself who have gone through this process, recovered, and are now there to provide empathy. They can take the venting because they've been there, so if you need a safe place to vent, they're happy to do that, or if you need some encouragement and an empathetic ear. Mark your calendar. Our next meeting will be on Thursday, November 7th, right back here at the chapel. So we thank them again very much for hosting us again next time. And that topic is going to be Construction 101, so reconstruction basics. For more information, I invite you to visit our website, www.uphelp.org. Before I jump into the substantive portion, Commissioner Littleton, let's have you come up and welcome the group.
Thank you. We definitely want to thank Karen so much once again for coming out. So Karen, give her a round of applause. So flies out, gives of her time, effort, and energy selflessly to come out and help us recover. And after having spent quite a bit of the day with other commissioners from all across the state of Colorado who are dealing with disasters of their own, a lot of them flooding, not fire this time, I'm sure Karen's going to be up and down the Front Range, helping people with what do we do during this season when we're trying to look at inventory, rebuilding. How many of you have had the opportunity, I think I see some of you that have attended the Mentor Connections meetings, where we actually sit down at round tables. We have Carla and who else is here? Carla, I think are both here, both of my Carlas, and sit down and really work with you on what does the inventory look like. We really flesh that out in a small round table group, so I encourage you to come to those meetings as well, and those will be up on the Black Forest Together website and the El Paso County website as well. Thanks again to Karen. Thank you guys for being here, commissioners. I appreciate you being here this evening as well, Commissioner Glenn. And Commissioner, where is Commissioner Clark is here, I think. Did she say Commissioner Clark? But no Commissioner Clark? Okay, I thought maybe she was here. So thanks again. Learn a lot from her. Learn a lot from the people who have gone through this. They have invaluable information, and at the Mentor Connection meetings, we'll sit down and flesh this out at a round table to help you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Commissioner Littleton. All right, so we're going to get right into it. Again, our timing is a little off from our agenda since we started a little late due to the traffic issues, but we're just going to get right in here. So tonight we're focusing in on the contents portion of the claims. So we're going to start in with insurance recovery tips for that portion. What's our goal? Our goal is to collect, right, the full amount that the insurer owes you for every item that was damaged or destroyed by the fire. Generally, this is going to involve preparing a very detailed inventory list that describes and values everything that you lost. And as you go through the process, you're going to start submitting receipts as well. So you're going to provide this inventory. Then as you actually replace items, you're going to be submitting receipts as well. So that's the general process most people are going to follow, or negotiating a waiver of the inventory requirement. I'm going to talk about that briefly. It's generally a smaller percentage of people who are able to do that, but we'll be talking about that as well. All right. What are your contents limits? Let's start there. So you want to start on your declarations page, all right? So that's always our starting point. Check the dollar amounts for the limits for your contents. You want to seek out any and all endorsements or extras that you paid for. You could have maybe an inflation protection endorsement, maybe you have an extended coverage. There's any of a number of endorsements that you may have purchased that will actually add money to the amount that appears on your declarations page. So what you want to do is go through that policy carefully. Again, one of our primary tenets you hear us say is every time is read the policy, because policies differ. And so you just wanted to get a good handle on that. The little yellow book is a great resource in terms of just making heads and tails of exactly what that policy language means. So again, do the math yourself, all right? So, you can certainly ask the adjuster, get their response, but make sure that you are doing your own due diligence, checking the numbers about the amount of coverage you have. Typically, contents limits are a percentage of your dwelling coverage. 70% is standard, but some of you may have 50%, some of you may have, 75%, some of you may even have a different number, but typically it's a percentage of your coverage a dwelling limit. You also want to check your policy for any scheduled categories, maybe fine jewelry, artwork. Some of you may have some scheduled items. Some of you have no scheduled items. But again, those are the types of things you want to be looking at when you're assessing the amount of money you have on that contents claim. Stay organized. Get that insurance recovery organizer, whether you use the one that UP provides or you create one yourself, and use it. Again, taking detailed notes about any conversations, any representations from insurance company personnel, particularly if they're telling you things about your contents claim. Oh, hey, there's no time limit. Take as much time as you need. Or, hey, we apply this amount of depreciation. Any of a number of things could potentially be said. You want to, again, take detailed notes, confirm any important promises in writing, creating that paper trail. We've talked about this a number of times, in our effective claims communication. It's very important here on the claims or on the personal property portion of the claim as well. So again, I know it may seem tedious, but keeping track and confirming representations and promises by insurance personnel is a really savvy thing to do. It's not unusual to have multiple adjusters during the pendency of your claim, because these claims go on for quite a while. So it's really important that you keep that paper trail. All right. Claim only what you lost. Never intentionally claim items that you did not have. That's fraud, and it is illegal. And let me just say this. I think, as these claims go on, and maybe sometimes the frustration level rises, it can be easy mentally perhaps to go to a dark place where you're like, you're messing with me? I'm going to mess with you. I mean, sometimes things can go to a not good place. And I'm just telling you, if you kind of start going there like you feel like you're maybe getting beat up on or just frustrated or whatever, just resist. Always only claim what you had, all right? So again, just never, even if you start to kind of have some negative thoughts about listing things you didn't have, don't do it. That's fraud, it's illegal, so don't go there. Don't be rushed. It takes time to document your lost items and to calculate those losses. So take the time that you need to fully document this claim. 4 terms that you really need to know, and we're going to go into each of these right after this. Depreciation, actual cash value, replacement cost, and holdback. These terms are really important in terms of understanding the contents portion of the claim and getting through it. Depreciation. All right, what is depreciation? It's the loss in value for an item of personal property for all reasons. Age, wear and tear, for any reason. It's just the loss in value that that piece of property sustains over time, regardless of the cause. All right, so it's just its loss in value. ACV, actual cash value. Actual cash value is the pre-loss value of an item, all right? This is sometimes explained as the price a willing buyer would have paid for that item the day before your loss. It is also sometimes defined by the formula replacement cost, so RC, so the actual current replacement cost, minus depreciation equals ACV. All right, so it's often referred to in those terms. Some policies limit the contents payout to ACV, but most policies, I'm going to get to this in a second today, are actually replacement cost policies. So again, you just want to, again, be reading your policy terms. What kind do you have? Do you have the more typical replacement cost policy, or do you have maybe an ACV policy? All right, so now we come to RC, replacement cost. All right, that is the cost to actually replace or repair your damaged or destroyed item. All right now. So again, that's the price you would go out to go and replace it, right? If we just went to the store right this moment, great. Most policies today are RC policies. Most of them are replacement cost policies because again, they're supposed to cover replacing what you lost at today's prices and to enable you to go out and again, replace it at its current value. To collect the full amount under a replacement cost policy, though, you have to actually replace the items, all right? So to collect that full RC value, right, that RC replacement cost, you have to actually go out and purchase it, replace it, and send the receipts, pardon me, I'm still getting the handle of this clicker, send the receipts to the insurer with a request that they pay you for the balance they owe you between the ACV they've already given you and now this differential, this replacement cost, because you just went out and replaced it. Holdback. What is holdback? Well, holdback is an amount of the money that your insurance company holds back from a payment to you because of depreciation. So standardly, you're going to submit these lists, right? These inventory lists that you're creating, these detailed lists. You'll submit them in, the insurance company will apply depreciation and then send you a check for the ACV, the actual cash value, right? And then as you start replacing items, you send in those receipts to collect that differential, all right? So that differential, that piece that they didn't pay you, you know what I'm saying, until you replace, that's the holdback, all right? Depreciation really matters. It's very, very important. Coming up with the cash to buy replacement items can be really hard, especially if your insurer has heavily depreciated on your contents list. Do you see what I'm saying? So again, the more they hold back, the less money you have to go out and replace your items. That's why depreciation is so important, all right? Because it really impacts the amount of money you have in your hand to be able to go out and replace these items. Here's the key thing. Even if you just take nothing else from this meeting, then this top line right here, there, depreciation is negotiable, all right? Depreciation is negotiable. And again, I remind you guys, this PowerPoint will be up on the UP website. It should be up there. I fly back tomorrow, so it will be up there by Monday. So again, this will be up there, so don't go too crazy if you're trying to write everything down. We'll have this up on the UP website. So again, it's negotiable. The more depreciation your insurer applies, the less you collect. Unfortunately, and this is one thing that makes it really challenging, there's no official standard on depreciation, right? If there was just some official nationally recognized standard, this would all be much easier, frankly. So there's really no official standard on how much that your items can be depreciated. And it can be hard to pin down an adjuster just on how much they're applying and what their formulas are. But again, the calculations really affect your bottom line. So again, if you feel that they are unfairly, lowly, just taking too much depreciation, don't be afraid to challenge them on that, all right, and to push back. You can ask in writing for your insurance company to provide you with the depreciation schedule that they used. And just remember, even though a lot of times they're going to focus almost solely on age, age isn't everything. Condition can be more important than age. So your inventory should list age and condition. Even if it was old, it may be in good or even excellent condition. All right, so again, age isn't your sole data point, is what I'm trying to say, into determining how much something should be depreciated. All right, and only you know the condition of the items that were destroyed. Nobody knows your items better than you. Gee, it was a formal gown that was worn one time, immediately dry cleaned, and then was sitting in tissue paper. Do you know what I'm saying? So again, nobody knows the condition of your items better than you. Depreciation guides can be a help. So again, they can help you determine the value of your contents. Again, there is no official depreciation schedule in common use across the United States, but there are some resources that you can consult. So again, here we're giving you a couple of examples. So again, on the UP website, www.uphelp.org/samples, there are some good consumer-oriented depreciation guides. Claimspages.com, again, that's another resource that you can consult, to get another look at another depreciation guide. So again, those are some samples that you can consult with. Excessive depreciation is a common problem, all right? So again, this is not atypical. So if you're experiencing this, it is not unusual. Again, you don't have to accept excessive depreciation of your items by the insurance company. If an insurer applies a fixed percentage across all items, challenge them. We would call that blanket depreciation. If they're saying like, oh, we're just going to go straight across the board at 50%, don't be afraid to push back on that. Negotiate depreciation and ACV holdbacks based on a case-by basis to reflect the condition of each item. You know what I'm saying? Because again, your items don't have the same, weren't in the same condition. Why are they applying the same depreciation across the board? That's not fair to you. There's going to be some items where it should be very low because those items are in really good condition. So again, adjusters may try to apply a set percentage across the board to all your items. So again, don't be afraid to, push back and really talk about the condition of each of those items. You don't have to take, blanket depreciation. Another useful concept when thinking about depreciation is remaining life expectancy. So again, you can also argue, another concept, kind of like another, what is it, bow or arrow in the quiver, is arguing about remaining life expectancy. You can argue that depreciation should be based upon the remaining life expectancy on an item, not necessarily the age of the item. We've got an example up there talking about some shag carpet, but basically the principle is this, so you've got this, carpet in a guest room that was put in 25 years ago, but nobody ever uses that guest room. Nobody goes in there. Well, according to a standard depreciation guide, it was supposed to last 5 years, so it's getting depreciated at 100%. Basically nobody's been in that room. So really the remaining life expectancy is still 100. You know what I'm saying? There should be no holdback on that. So again, this concept of, really thinking in terms of remaining life expectancy is also a way that you can push back if you feel that excessive depreciation is being applied to items on your inventory. Strategically speaking, you're most likely it's unlikely that you're going to replace everything you lost, and it's a hassle to keep having to provide receipts over time. So trying to maximize your ACV payment by arguing for lower depreciation, right? So you get up to those limits quicker because you've got lower holdback. especially on the big ticket items, is going to get you up to those contents limits quicker, really is probably, going to be the most time efficient. So again, and identifying true replacement cost at standard, not discount retailers. So again, arguing for lower depreciation, lower holdback, higher ACV. So again, you get up, collect those limits. Again, I think a lot of us have, stuff. We have so much junk in our lives and so much junk in our attics. Most people are not going to replace everything they had. So what's our goal is to collect the money that we're due, and again, lower that depreciation as much as we can. So again, we can get paid what we're owed. Frankly, many items shouldn't even be subject to depreciation. So don't be afraid to make arguments. Again, antiques, they appreciate, not depreciate. Fine art, jewelry. So again, just keeping in mind, again, that top slide that I gave you, which is that depreciation is negotiable. And if you're getting over depreciated on items, use some of these arguments to push back. Remaining useful life. Actually, this is an item that appreciates, not depreciates, so it shouldn't be getting depreciated at all. Completing the personal property inventory, again, use UP's resources is a great starting point to help you with this very daunting task. Again, our flash drive, our free Excel PDF forms at uphelp.org. We've got lists to use as memory joggers in the Disaster Recovery Handbook. And again, our tips and sample depreciation schedule, again, on the website. So all of those are resources to assist you in this task. Don't be afraid to ask friends and family to help you complete this task. Again, many of your friends and family, probably all of your family, if they're local, have been in your house, or were in your house many, many times before it went down. You can ask them to sit down and remember what they can. Ask them to look at your lists. Like, hey, here's my list. Can you think of anything else that I might have forgotten? All right? Also, do your friends or family maybe have pictures? Again, special events that took place at your home, a birthday party, an anniversary party. There's going to be items in the background of those pictures that will also help serve as a memory jogger for you. So again, friends and family want to help. This is a good, tangible way that you can have them help. All right? Use technology. Some, stores that have gift registry scanners, congratulations, you all just got engaged. There you go. So happy for all of you. No, go in, use a gift registry scanner, go in there and register and do your gift registry. You're going to have all the pricing right there. Stores that you shop at regularly, that's a great use of technology. Internet shopping, pricing information. Again, I think this is another good way in this technological age that you can have friends and family help you. You're working on the list. You can have one of your friends or two of your friends with their computers working on the pricing right there. You're working on the list, they're working on the pricing. Get some help and let the internet help. Your credit card companies have records of big, I should put big and small items you've charged, but again, as a memory jogger for you. Like, if I make most of my big purchases on my credit card, hey, why don't I just request my credit card company to send me my statements for the last 2 years, and again, have a friend go through those, or have a family member, or you, because you're going to be like, I totally forgot about that. Again, these are all ways to let technology help you. All right. Visualization, it can be really helpful. A lot of people do this is when you're working on the inventory, visualize the room. Close your eyes. Some of you might have already done this. Some of you might have been like, haven't thought of that. Close your eyes and visualize that room and walk around it. Open up drawers, open up cabinets. Visualization is a really powerful tool. If you haven't tried it, try it. It can be really helpful. Also, too, like I said, eyes closed, maybe have a dictaphone right there, or somebody where you just start saying, okay, I see this, I see this, I see this, and have somebody write down as you're kind of mentally scrolling through the cabinets and the drawers in your old home. Keep a running list on you. Another important strategy. Things come, believe me, I'm still remembering things that burned down in my house 10 years ago. So just let me tell you, that's going to happen to you for a long time. So keep a list on you, or if you've got a smartphone, have a note where you just, when something comes up or you see something, you're like, I had that. Keep track of it, pen and paper or on a smartphone, on a note. The emotional aspect of doing the personal property inventory. So we've talked a lot of pragmatics. claims information. I'm going to take a few minutes now, and I'm going to turn to the emotional aspect. I might get a little shaky because it's still like, I would say many have described, and I would personally describe, doing the personal property inventory as the most emotionally draining aspect of the recovery process. Personally, I was talking to some of you earlier, like I was trying to forget everything that had burned down. I wasn't trying to remember it in painstaking detail, especially those emotional items, those photo albums, wedding gowns. Thank you, that was enjoyable. So it's it's hard. So if you haven't tried having friends and family assist you and it's been really tough, I encourage you to do that. Friends and family can be a great source of support when you're working on that inventory. They can, be there to comfort you. They can be there to provide comic relief when it gets pretty brutal. So again, if you're not, that's a strategy. Another strategy, working with other fire survivors, get a group and say like, hey, personal property inventory Tuesday, my house, everybody BYOB, and get together with others. That old saying, misery loves company, as I found after my own fire, it's true. So those sayings are true. So working together as a community with neighbors who are going through the same thing, there's nothing like being with other fire survivors who really get it, but it is very tough. I remember doing my own contents inventory in the beginning, and my two best friends were sitting at the table with me. And, I used to be pretty crafty. I used to do all sorts of crafty stuff. And I remember my one girlfriend, she had a Michaels advertisement, because she was saying, she was going through it. She's like, okay, did you have the glue gun? Did you have this? And so she was listening, and I was like, yes, no. Yes, no, and then we were writing it down. She gets to this. It's still an inside joke in my family now. It's going to be a very big joke. She looks at me, she goes, googly eyes. Did you have any googly eyes? And I was like, what? She goes, the Google eyes, the things that you put in a craft project. I was like, what? She goes, googly eyes. I was like, and that was it. I literally started laughing and crying, and I couldn't stop for a good 15 to 20 minutes, because why in the world we were freaking discussing googly eyes and the house had burned down? I can't actually wrap my head around that. And I remember her yelling up to my husband, who was going through our policy, with a fine-tooth comb. She's like, Bill, she goes, I think she's done with the inventory for today. So, I'm sure you guys have all had your moments of googly eyes or other items where you're like, okay, officially done for today. So again, being with friends and family, being with other fire survivors can really be a support. All right. An inventory waiver. All right, let me start here. Our starting point on this subtopic is that insurance companies generally do not step outside the four corners of the contract, e.g. the policy, unless there's a good business reason to do so. And those policies typically require a detailed inventory or an inventory of some type. So again, that's our starting point. They generally don't break from that unless there's a good business reason for them to do so. The key word is generally, and there are always exceptions. And there might be people in here who have circumstances where this could happen. So it's just worth putting out there, but in the same breath, I don't want to give anybody any sort of false hope, like, hey, she said I'll just get a waiver. It's a long shot. So, hey, we end right there with that. It's likely a long shot. In my experience, a couple of things that I've seen people be successful getting inventory waivers on, very serious and well-documented health issues, such that, again, they're basically unable to complete the inventory, and I mean documented, not just asserted, but well-documented with support. And even then, it can be quite a struggle, but I've seen that be a successful a successful way to get an inventory waiver. If there's been bad actions by the insurance company or actions that might subject them to a bad faith claim, or if they've engaged in any improper conduct, I've seen fire survivors leverage those circumstances into an inventory waiver. That's a possibility. Those are a couple that I'll toss out there, and there may be other ones. So again, I just put that out there. It is a long shot, but some people have been able to do that. Interestingly, some companies have waived the personal property inventory requirement in some disasters. That has happened. Go to the UP website and you can see our survey results. For example, 39% of the 2007 San Diego firestorm survivors surveyed reported having their personal property inventory requirement waived for one reason or another. So, note to self. But again, keep in mind that even aside from that, there may be other important reasons to complete an inventory, such as tax reasons. So even though it might be appealing, there might be a countervailing, reason to actually complete it, even if you were able, or in such a circumstance, to might be able to argue for a waiver. All right, so that's, again, food for thought. Professional help. All right, so again, if you want to, again, retain professional help, public adjusters and or home inventory specialists are usually available to be retained to assist you if you're so inclined. And again, if you want to go that route, hiring professional help, UP's got lots of tips on hiring professional help at the website. Generally speaking, again, be polite, but be assertive, to ensure that you recover a full and fair settlement on this contents portion. Give your insurance company absolutely the chance to fulfill its promises and to do the right thing. Approach insurance companies with a positive attitude, but be assertive, all right? And know that if you feel like, for example, that depreciation is being applied in too heavy-handed a fashion, you can push back, all right? You don't sign any releases or waivers or forms without getting advice from an experienced attorney. That would be UP's best advice for you. And remember that the policy does not require you to sign, away any sort of legal rights in order to get paid fairly for a covered loss. Like, you don't have to waive anything to get paid for a covered loss, all right? We're going to move now to our next speaker, which is Steve Price, who is going to talk about documenting your contents claim using Excel or whatever. And Steve, I hope there he is. I was like, well, please raise your hand. If he's not in here, we're in big trouble. Steve, come on up. So again, Steve Price, Waldo Canyon Fire Survivor 2012. And let me hand that right over. Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Karen.
Just right there.
Good. Hey, gang, how you doing? Good to see you guys. It's good to see familiar faces. Let me tell you before I go too far into this, and this is where I could get emotional, this lady's my hero. I mean, to tell you what, when we went through our loss, I was fortunate to be directed to the UP website and found a video that Karen had done for High Park up in Fort Collins. And I watched that video, I got a yellow book, and I studied it. And she was my inspiration to especially get through this part, which is a tough piece. So thank you so much. Okay, so hey guys, I've been there. There's some things I want to share with you, and that some things I did well and some things I probably could have done better. So I'm going to try to help steer in that direction as well. All right, here's again, and not to repeat what Karen said, but my sense is that your primary objective is to get the most amount of cash you can as soon as possible. So not just the most amount of cash, sooner in your account. The advice that I got was, don't turn away any checks. You get checks, you put them in the bank. It's harder for them to get them back. So get as much money as you can. Get it in the bank. You're going to need that money for different things, and guess what? It's your money, right? You're entitled to it, and it's not, in my opinion, it's not right. It's not fair for them to hold back your money. My experience, and again, recalling back to one of the first meetings that I had with our adjusters, he said, "Well, you have replacement cost coverage. It really doesn't matter. We'll pay you guys ACV, and then when you replace everything, we'll give you the rest of the money." I cracked that code quickly. What I realized was that if I could document my claim, being factual, not exaggerating, but document my claim to a point where I exceeded my replacement cost policy limits, they would pay me those policy limits, and I didn't have to replace everything that I had. I got the money, and then I had the money in my hand, and I could spend it on the house, I I could spend it on whatever I wanted to. So that was a key ingredient for us. You want to try to minimize, your negotiations and delays as well. Gang, I don't know if this is what they teach in Insurance 101 for these folks, but it seems like when you're going through it, everything takes way longer than it should. What I've come to find out is most folks, I think most of the adjusters are probably pretty good folks. I think that what happens is the bigger the claim, the more eyes look at it, that takes longer. If you're like me, you're kind of a pissed off Irishman, then I might have made things more difficult for myself at times. But I have a mind like a steel trap. When they said something, I captured it. I used those words against them. And I learned that early on because my motto, and I've said to you guys in this very room, is that the Miranda rule applies. What you say can and will be used against you. Okay? So just be very cautious about that. We're going to try to minimize your delays. All right? Now, if you've got a partial loss, it doesn't mean that you can't hit policy limits, but it's going to be more difficult. Particularly, and Carrie will talk about that, or is Carrie talking today? Okay. All right. So next time, but anyway, Carrie's spoken about it in the past. It's partial losses, they're harder to document. Now, with a full loss, again, the goal is to try to hit your policy limits. All right, when you do that, remember you've got basic coverage. So if you know you have replacement cost coverage, you have basic coverage, which Karen talked about, and basically your contents are all wheeled off of that basic coverage in your coverage A, your dwelling, as a percentage. But don't forget that if you've got replacement costs, you've got an inflation index in there as well. So that's something you want to keep in mind. All right, and then you've got your replacement cost coverage all the way. So when you look at it, you've got your base coverage, you've got an inflation index, and then you've got your replacement coverage as well. To the extent that you can document your loss that exceeds that replacement cost, if you can do that properly, you'll get paid long before you have to buy all of those things. It makes a big difference. All right, so I've put a couple little notes. You won't be able to read this, but this is just pages right out of my policy. And so I've highlighted a couple of the things for you. One is this top box talks about personal property. That's your coverage B. All right, now I've blown a couple pieces up. You may be able to see it. The middle box on the left, that's your inflation protection coverage. And the bottom talks about replacement coverage. So you'll see, you're going to need to pull up your policy. And as Karen said, you've got to read it. Not just read it, study it. You need to know it well. I've said and used this analogy in the past. Your policy is like the NFL rule book. Okay? So it's like the playing field that they're used to playing on. We're the Pop Warner team. We haven't even had a practice yet. These guys got coaches up and down the other sidelines. They've been doing this for 30 years. They got pros. This is like Pop Warner playing the New England Patriots. So you got to study it. And we're going to go to what I call Insurance 101. So hopefully you'll be able to leverage off of our experience and make sure that I'm available, my wife's available, those of us who volunteer, we'll make ourselves available to you guys as we do that. Okay, so this again is a screen capture right out of my own policy that talks about the coverage B. I'm not going to take the time to read that. Every policy is going to be a little different, but most policies are very similar. They oftentimes start out with a standard form, and then each company kind of modifies them time and again. And again, it depends on the amount of coverage that you buy and whether you've got the Cadillac or the Chevy, etc. But that's something you want to get very familiar with. It really reduces your credibility and your negotiating power if you try to claim something under your personal property that's not something that's allowed in your policy. It makes you look weak and unsophisticated. And so I heartily encourage you, try to get to know those things. There's also a list in there of the things that they don't cover. Make sure you know that. Now, that said, I'll segue here for a second. I was successful in recognizing fairly early on that I thought I would hit policy limits on my home. So I was pretty confident that I could do that. But, so what I did then is I was able to take certain items out of what would have been part of my dwelling. For example, I had cabinetry in the garage. I made the argument that, look, I was going to unscrew that stuff and take it with me and put it in the new house when I moved. They actually took that out and put it into personal property. Because I wanted to try, I knew I'd maximize my home. I wasn't sure if I was going to hit my policy limits on my content. So you could use some of those kinds of strategies. What I'm going to focus on, gang, today is I get to the end of my presentation, let's talk about the very basics of how you'll document that claim. And then after you're done with that, we can talk for weeks and weeks about lots of little strategies and things you can do after you finish documenting your claim about how you might use those strategies to your advantage. All right? Now, again, I've highlighted this as well to show, hey, they're only going to pay what? They're going to pay the actual cash value, but not more than the cost to repair or replace. They're not going to pay more. And the other thing is up to that policy limit. All right? Now, the other piece to keep in mind are these deadlines. You want to look for these, because if you miss these deadlines, you could jeopardize your entire claim. For example, you can see right up at the top under number 1, you have to notify us within 180 days of your decision to repair or replace. So as soon as I read that in my policy, I shot them off an email and said, hey, I intend to repair or replace. Did I? No, I didn't. But I wanted to make sure I met that deadline. So be very careful about that. Second, in my policy, we have 1 year to replace. You want to keep that in mind. Some of the other policies, USA, for example, I think it's 2 years. Some are much shorter than that. You want to read those very carefully. In my experience, and I'm no expert, Karen could speak to this, but in my experience, there's 3 deadlines you want to look for. One is the deadline to to notice, the deadline to repair or replace, which applies to your contents and your structures and other structures, those things. And the third is the right to sue. Karen spoke briefly about things like bad faith claims. What I would tell you is that if you're having a good experience, great. If you're running up against a lot of roadblocks, which we did, what I found is there was a body of evidence where I was able to use their words against them so that I could eventually make a claim for bad faith if I chose to. We didn't do that because we settled. No problem. But if to the extent that you don't feel like you're being treated fairly, you want to lock that away, and remember, that's ammo. That's a bullet in your gun. All right. All right, so this is probably one of the most important slides and things to point out. This, again, right out of my policy. So what it says is give us a detailed list. That means give us a description of the damaged property. It says show us the quantities. How many were there? When and where they were acquired. Basically what that's saying is tell us the age. Tell us the age. And then where was it acquired? I don't know. I don't remember. You know, it could have been Taiwan, right? You're not going to have perfect recall on this stuff. And I found that was not an impediment to me finalizing my claim. It tells you you need to include the original cost. Now, your policy may be different, so you want to look for this language. And what I would tell you is, if you go through this and you look at these, count these up, a detailed list, quantities, age, where it was acquired, cost, and value. There's 6 things there. That's all I wanted to give them. That's all I needed to give them. Now, they'll ask for a lot more than that, right? But you're not obligated to do that. So anytime they would do things like, well, I need to know this and this and this, my response was simple. Show me in the policy where it says I have to do that. I'll be happy to comply. I'll do everything to meet the obligations of the policy, but show me where it says that. You can do it very nicely, nicer than me. Okay? All right. This comes back to, again, loss value determination. This is under the conditions under Section 1. So again, you'll look back here. It says, hey, we're only going to pay your ACV at the time of loss. I love that term. It was something I'd never heard before. Look, guys, that's the depreciated value, right? That's all it is. What's it worth today? Okay? All right, so we're only going to pay the ACV at the time of loss, at the time of the loss. All right, but not more than the cost to repair or replace. Okay, so no, not more. But now remember, to the extent you can negotiate, you can fully document your claim. And in my case, I was shooting for about, I figured I could stop at about 125% of my RCV, my replacement cost. I could figure I could stop at about that. Because by the time I applied my own depreciation, by the way, the whole dialogue about depreciation, Steve has lots of gray hair because of that discussion and lots of anger. The reality is, what they say your stuff is worth, or what it is depreciated, or what it's worth today is meaningless. It's what you say. As Karen said, you know your stuff. Bear in mind, they don't insure your stuff. They insure your house. And your stuff is just insured as a percentage of the house, right? So they never saw your stuff. I think it's ironic that what happens is they tend to say, well, you're underinsured here, you're overinsured there. I'm like, wait a minute. You're saying I'm underinsured on my house, but overinsured on the stuff you never saw? I don't get it. So, again, bear in mind, you got to do exactly what the policy says. My advice is don't do anything more than that. And if they ask for it, say, show me on the policy where it is, and I'll comply. All right, and again, they'll only go to policy limits. Now, if you've bought additional protection, all right, you may have replacement cost coverage. And again, that's going to apply to all kinds of things. And there's a laundry list there. So it may be things you hadn't even thought of, or you're thinking, gee whiz, my awnings, I thought that's going to be part of my dwelling, or this or that. That was another thing I found. As I started looking at my dwelling claim and what my adjuster put into the dwelling, I found that, hey, there's a whole bunch of things in the dwelling that really ought to be moved over into other structures, or that ought to be moved into my contents. Because again, my goal is to what? Maximize the claim, hit policy limits on all those things. So here's another piece of advice on the contents. Don't get hung up on, Aunt Martha's cedar chest. It's hard, it's very difficult, it's extremely emotional. So you may need to rely on friends or others to help you, family to help you do this. But don't get hung up on winning a battle. We're trying to win the war, and that is to get paid policy limits on all of our stuff as soon as possible. Put the money in your pocket as quickly as you can. All right, notice here, if you have replacement coverage, it says without deducting for depreciation. So again, to the extent that you see those kinds of things, let's say awnings, stuck in your dwelling piece, you want to say, hey, I need to pull that out. That's not right. Number one, you're not supposed to put any depreciation on that. Okay. All right. Just here, again, I pulled these in just because, again, now it's in policy. Now notice this is the third time you've seen this exact language. So in my policy, it was in 3 times. They're going to only pay up to the ACV at the time of the loss, but never more than policy limits. A lot of people say, gosh, can I get more than that? In my experience, I didn't. I stopped at policy limits. That was all they were going to get. My rule of insurance, now they've been Insurance 101, or Insurance University, is this. They expect all the premiums to be paid what? On time, right? And they'll only pay up to, but never exceeding anything they're obligated to pay. Never pay a penny more, not 1 penny more. So to the extent that you are, let's say you started your negotiations at $100,000, and you think it's worth $200,000, and then they settle for $200,000, the point I make is you were always owed what? $200,000. Okay? Doesn't mean they won't try to negotiate for something less. All right, so there's the take home. Karen said it. You want to read this policy, get to know it, study it, live with it. All right, it's very difficult. I've been in the commercial investments real estate business for 33 years. I read and write contracts for a living. These are probably the most complicated contracts I've ever read. I felt like an idiot, to be honest with you. But once I got my arms around it, I really studied it. I went back, I created my own table of contents, right? And then I could say, oh, I see where this goes to here, this goes to here. You'll see how it works. Again, get to know it well. All right, on the UP site, again, Karen's pointed this out. There's a section right here, all right? And you won't be able to read that, but that deals with your contents claim. So that's where you want to go. When you go right into that UP Help website, there it is right there on that spot where it says, how can we help you? All right, so that's a good spot to go. As you go in there, you'll see that there's some places, and this again is hard to read, but there's a home inventory and content claim tips. All kinds of tips. I couldn't even do screen captures because it's a very, very long laundry list of good tips in there. So you want to study that. Do we have handouts for those tonight? Yeah, okay. All right. So again, refer to any handouts, or you can go back in and take a very close look at that. You can print this stuff out too. Also, most of the things that are attachments on the website can be printed out as PDFs. Okay, so a couple of tips on just basic stuff. And this doesn't have to do with Excel. It has more to do with just documenting your claim. You get to select the format for how you document your claim. So a little joke here. Hey, look, if you want to do it on a stone tablet, you have the right to do that. All right? You can use Word. You can use Excel, or you can just write it down if you're comfortable with that. I want to try to maybe break down some of the barriers to some of the technology if I can do that. Now, over on the UP site, this is actually just a little screen capture of the table of contents section on the home inventory list. I noticed that Karen and I talked the other day about it, about putting one up that is in an Excel format. It's there. I just checked it on my phone, which is great for those of you who have got some familiarity with Excel. This one is a paper form. It looks just like this. So here's one of the, whoops, oh yeah, technology. Okay, so this is just a paper form. So if you printed this out, it's just a PDF, and that's what it looks like. Now that'll work. One of the things I will tell you, though, that is if you do it in an electronic format, like Excel, as you negotiate, if you do it right, you can build formulas into those spreadsheets so that as you negotiate, that you might be able to calculate the depreciation on each and every item as you sit down with your adjuster and then get to a number. Okay, so you've got to meet those policy requirements. In my case, I had 6 things I had to do. So that was kind of the basis on how I wanted to build my spreadsheet. That's what I was thinking about. All right, now, if it's not in the policy, I've already said, just use caution. The Miranda rule applies. What you say can and will be used against you. All right? I think you should add some additional information beyond what they specifically call for in the policy. For example, your name, address, claim number, the data loss. In my policy, it asks for that. You want to check. My guess is that you need that too. So when I built my claim forms in Excel, I just put it in as a header to put all those things in one time and then copied them out so that they were easy to, they'd show it on every single page. By the way, I brought a copy of what I built so you can take a look at it if you like. Again, the condition, as Karen talked about, it depends on the age, the life, all those things. Love that example. There were lots and lots and lots and lots of things. I would say 95% of the things, I thought they over-depreciated, maybe 97%, something like that. And what my rule of thumb was, we had nice stuff, I'm sure you did too. If I thought it was over-depreciated, I immediately flagged it, put it in my Excel form, and then I sat there and made that a point of contention for my negotiations. And it worked out for me. I basically did one thing. I kept in mind, I want to win the war. I'm not going to worry about Martha's cedar chest, okay? I'm trying to hit policy limits. So one thing I did, I applied some depreciation to almost everything, not everything. If I knew it was new, if I knew it was in the box kind of condition, I applied 0 depreciation. But out of 101 pages, single-spaced, I can tell you there's probably maybe less than 50. Otherwise, I put some depreciation in there, and I felt like that was a little bit of a give back to the adjuster so they could say, well, at least he put something in. He might have started at 30, 45%, and I wound up with 5%. But I would say I was targeting for somewhere around 10 to 20% on most of my items, and that worked for me. All right, you get to estimate your depreciation. Again, you'll be able to do that in Excel if you're familiar with it. I also like putting some kind of disclaimer in there. I'm not a lawyer. I'll tell you right up front, I get charged with being a lawyer all the time, but if I got my degree, it was at Kmart, and no offense to the good lawyers in the room, but I think having a good disclaimer in there, things like, hey, look, I reserve the right to change this. There's going to be things you remember down the road. Now, what I did, guys, I did not share this with my adjuster until I was done. So we were in the position to be able to do that. I wanted to make sure it was as complete as I could possibly make it. So once I turned it in, you can imagine, had I turned them in, my receipts in one at a time, it would have made it pretty easy on my adjuster. But frankly, I didn't see that requirement in my policy. So what I thought was maybe it would be to my advantage to turn in 101 pages single-spaced. And then we could sit down and actually go through, if we needed to, negotiate line by line. If it takes a 4-hour or a 5-hour meeting, I'm happy to do that. And I think it worked out in my favor. So I like things like, hey, you have the right to modify. It's subject to change. The ages are all approximate. These are your best estimates. We've put this back. Bear in mind, you try to replace your furniture, you go out to try to shop for it today, what you bought 5-10 years ago is not available on the market today. So you're going to have to do your best to find something comparable. It's a good place to put down some disclaimer. Okay, before I get into a broad topic of Excel, let's just get a sense. How many people would say they're maybe an intermediate to advanced user of Excel? Okay. So maybe a third, something like that. All right. So let me not delve too deeply into what happens with Excel. First of all, you need to know that Excel is just a spreadsheet. And we all heard that term, even if you're not familiar with using them. It's nothing more than a digital piece of paper that has a series of columns and they're arranged alphanumerically. Okay, so you've got columns and you've got rows. The intersection of those columns and rows are known as a cell. Okay, and so what you can do is in those columns, remember I had 6 things, right? I need to put a description, how many I had, how old it was, where I bought it, what I paid for it, to my best of my recollection, right? And then come up with my estimate of the value today. My estimate. That means my depreciation. So what I did is I built an Excel spreadsheet. It was pretty easy to do. I'll consider myself an intermediate user. I built a spreadsheet that had those formulas built in there, and then I was able to collapse those columns so they didn't show up in what I sent to the insurance company. So it's nothing more than a digital piece of paper with columns and rows. The intersection of those is known as a cell. Okay, now each of these, when you open up a spreadsheet in Excel, what you really get is a workbook. And a workbook is made up of a number of different spreadsheet pages. So it defaults to 3. You'll see that what I did is I went through and I organized my spreadsheets according to my memory, just like Karen suggested, right? My inspiration was here. And so that's what I did. I walked around the house mentally. And I'll show you that. I'll talk about it. Okay, so what I did, I started off on the outside. I mentally walked around my home. I said, okay, this is the south yard. Here's what I had. Boom, 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 boom. I walked around the east yard, the north side, the west side, and I took inventory of all those things out there that would fall under my contents. I was very careful not to put down one thing that wouldn't qualify under my coverage B. All right, then I started walking in the house. What I did was I tried to organize my home by each room. So Excel's pretty easy, but if you're not familiar with it, you're not comfortable with it, I don't want to make you an Excel user, but you might be able to get somebody to help you. All right, so I would encourage that. You don't have to do it in Excel. You don't have to do it digitally. You can do it on a stone tablet if you choose, but it's harder to manipulate. All right, so what I did is I created an Excel page for each room of my house. So as I walked in the foyer, I could see what was on the walls. I could see what was in the furniture. I knew what was on the floor. I did that for each and every room. I walked in, and I took inventory. I started with things like furniture, and then I started going through closets, and then I actually went down into every drawer and every door. And I took inventory in my mind, and it took a while. It was a long process. But let me tell you, it made a huge difference in our ability to move into our new home, which, by the way, we did on Friday. Yeah, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, guys. Okay, so that's how we did it. I want to recommend that if you do any digital kind of inventory, save your work very frequently. What I typically do is put a file name and then the date. So typically computers don't like these forward slashes kind of things, but I'll use a dash. So if I was doing my inventory today, I work my inventory, I work it till I'm exhausted. Okay, I've got enough done for today. Hit the wall. I'm going to save that as personal property 10 dash, what's today? The 3rd, 13. Dash 13, 10-03-13. And then tomorrow when I work on it, I'm going to save it as a new one, 10-4-13. See how that works? And then I've always got a running inventory, and I've got a backup of what that looked like. All right? The last thing that I did is I created a summary page. And in Excel, you can do this. And this is probably on the intermediate side, but not that difficult. I created a summary page. So what I did is I took every room, I calculated the RCV, the replacement cost, and I said, hey, here's where I can get that thing. But bear in mind, you do not have to shop at China.com. You don't have to shop at elcheapo.com, right? You want to show, hey, here's where I shop, whether it's Nordstrom or Whole Foods or whatever it might be. Okay, so then you apply your own depreciation to come up with your ACV, your depreciated value, and then I created a summary page which showed every part of the house outside, then every room inside, with the RCV, the ACV, and then I added some things to it. Things like delivery charges, tax, maybe I had items like decorator fees, those kinds of things. I plugged all that stuff in there on my summary page, and I did that using just kind of a simple cut and paste function of Excel. And then what happened is, as I went through with my adjuster into every room and went through these items, and it really wasn't too difficult because frankly I overwhelmed them with work. Once I overwhelmed them with work, they would found it was just easier to cut me a check and make me go away. Okay? So I think the weight test works well. Give them as much work as possible. If you could say something in an email and you want to talk about 25 different things, my recommendation is send 25 emails. Okay? That's how I did it. Worked out okay for us. All right, so you want to triple check your work because you don't want to turn anything in that's wrong. Remember, don't dirty your policy. She talked about that. It's not just fraud. It is fraud. Yeah, you can go to jail for that. That's a bad thing. As important as it could jeopardize or delay your entire claim. So if there's anything in there that looks fishy to them, then that could jeopardize or delay your entire claim. So you want to be very careful about that. All right, then once I triple checked it, I had somebody else look at it. Say, hey, does this make sense? Is it organized? It makes sense. All right, then you might want to collapse or remove any cells, that are for your use only. All right, I didn't want to show them, for example, all the things about how I calculated my depreciation. You'll see if you look at my hard copies that I showed the percentages, and I think that was enough. Oh, what did he put on here? So I didn't show them that. And by the way, if you're familiar with electronic forms, I never sent them an Excel file, ever. What I did is I collapsed them, I saved it, as I mentioned, personal property with the date, and then I saved it as a PDF file. You know what a PDF is? It's like a graphics file, right? They can't open that. So that's all they got. So if they wanted to replicate my 101 pages of single-spaced stuff, they'd have to put it into an Excel spreadsheet that would take them months to do. I know it took us months, okay? And I think I finally just wore them out, okay? It took about 4 months, but that's doing it the Angry Stevie way, okay? I think you can do it much easier than the way I did it. All right, so you want to save it as an Excel worksheet first, then save it as a PDF for the insurance company. Make sense? Okay. All right, now I'm not going to dial down into this. It gets way too small to read, but this is an example of the cover page in my file. You may not be able to read this in the back, but it shows on the left, sheet 1 through 16, and this goes way down to however many rooms were in our home. So it tells you what the location was. There's the RCV, the ACV, and when you get down to the bottom, it added things like tax, delivery charges. And another thing, guys, I'll warn you about your contents claims. If you try to do them on some of these electronic things that are kind of floating around out there, what happens on Google, or I think Yahoo's taken that over now, what they tend to do online, if you're comparison shopping online, is show you the cheapest prices. Remember, that's not our goal, right? You want to shop where you shop. So if you shop at Nordstrom, then why would you want to price an item at wherever? Make sense? Okay, so our goal is to what? Get as much money as we can, as soon as we can. Minimize our headaches and get paid, put the money in the bank. Okay, so I think that's really as much as I've got, Karen, without digging into Excel, because I think it's just too much.
No, I think that was great. Steve, thank you so much for sharing your process and your insight. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to move, and I'm going to invite our last guest speaker. So again, we're running a little over since we started a little bit late, but last but certainly not least, I want to welcome up Mr. Chris Rockers, who's a licensed public adjuster from Matrix Business Consulting, to share his insight, being a PA for many, many years and working through many, many personal property claims. There we go, Chris.
Gotcha. Folks, I'm not going to share a heck of a lot much more than what Karen offered and what Steve offered. You've got is the best right here. They've both been survivors. They've gone through the process. I'm going to share a bit with you about what it is that we do when we put a claim together. But I'm telling you, they are spot on in what they've just shared with you. So I'm going to be redundant, but I'm going to try to be relatively quick here. When we put a claim together, we say you got to know your policy. Know your policy inside and out. You've heard it time and time again here tonight. So know your policy inside and out. I'm going to go over a couple of the provisions that they've already gone over, but at least we're going over it again, so you know how important it is to know your policy. Use it to your advantage so you aren't used at, or it's a disadvantage, so they don't use it against you. So know your policy. Take the time to prepare a detailed estimate. It does take time. Folks, it's going to take a long time to resolve your claim. Separate from the contents portion, you got your dwelling portion. It's your claim. You need to support your claim. You need to put the documents together because if you don't, they're not going to offer things to you or for you. So the policy is going to dictate what it is that you're able to recover. And as they noted as well, when you communicate with the carrier, solidify things in writing. You can have your conversations with them, but you want the email chains, you want the letters, and you want to clarify or solidify what it is that you guys discussed with them. Be persistent, be polite. The responsibility is yours to file that claim. Responsibility is yours to make it as accurate as possible. But they also have a duty, a good faith duty, and a duty to deal with you in good faith and fair dealing to make sure that they're extending everything that you're entitled to under your policies, okay? And the way you're going to do that is so you know your policy. So you got to take the time to know the policy. We briefly discussed A, B, C, and D, and some policies are different. Coverage A is typically your dwelling. Coverage B is other structures. Coverage C is contents, is what we're going to talk about here. And then you have D, which is your ALE. And as they shared with you, most things are dependent upon your limit under coverage A. So as an example, if your coverage A limit is $500,000, coverage B is usually 10% of that, or $50,000, and coverage C is, like Karen suggested, anywhere from 50 to 75% of that amount. So if you have $500,000 as your coverage A limit, your contents coverage is $375,000 at 75%. The carrier is telling you that they will pay up to that amount, but it's not a guarantee. Even on a total loss, they're going to say, obligation is yours to prove to us that that is your claim. So we say you've got to know your policy, and your policy and your declaration pages are different. Okay? You may have a policy, and every year you're going to get a renewal, and that renewal will show your declaration pages and any changes that they may make to your policy, but it's not your policy. Every year when you get something in the mail, you're getting your declaration pages that state your limits and changes that they've been made to the policy, but it's not your policy, and you need both, because there are some extensions and endorsements that you need to be aware of. Karen and Steve referenced those as well. Very important that you know your policy. So I'm just going to go through a couple of the, I think I am. Where did I go wrong here?
Turn that up and then forward. There we go.
There we go. Okay. So under personal property, coverage C, we're going to whip through these because a lot of them have already been covered. But you'll notice that there's, where you see insured person is highlighted or bolded. In the policy, the carrier will make certain words or phrases to give them special meaning. They chose what words to give special meaning to, and they chose which words not to give special meaning to. But here, personal property, coverage C, is covered anywhere in the world, and there are certain limits. There are probably 14 categories of items that may have a special limit that you need to be aware of. We still say, here they say you have a $200 limit for money. But if you lost $500, claim the $500 and let the carrier tell you that you have a $200 limit. And again, check your endorsements and the like because they may have changed. Maybe it's another $300 or $500 limit. But make sure you go through the policy, be aware of your limits, but claim what it is that you lost. Let them tell you if there's a limit. Same thing.
repair or replace the property. What you don't want to get into a position is you want to resolve your claim, and you don't want to then have to go back and say, I actually paid more for this table than I had on my list. Because they're going to basically say, if we resolve the claim, we'll pay that amount, but we're not going to keep increasing that amount. Does that make sense? Okay, our loss settlement. It's a long process, folks. We will settle within 60 days after the amount of loss is finally determined. It's going to take a long time, and we've actually dealt with people that say, actually, it's not 60 days from when the loss is determined, because they'll say, we'll actually give you your ACV, but you still need to submit receipts to get your replacement costs. So don't expect to get full payment within 60 days after you think that you've settled the loss or resolved it, because carriers typically don't do that. This is an example of a spreadsheet that we got, and it's similar to what Steve suggested, and it asks for a number of...
It has a number of columns where it's asking you to provide information, some of which simply aren't necessary. Give me a sec here. They ask you to provide the room, brand, model, shape, size, color, quantity, age, RCV, where priced, the original price, where obtained, and how purchased. And a lot of that information, whoops, did I go back? Sorry. Okay. The list needs to be detailed, folks, and we're saying the more detail that you provide, the better it is, and the more you're able to support your claim. So detail, but we know it's a long, difficult process. It is an emotional process. We actually assisted some people where it took over a year and a half to complete their contents claim. Some carriers don't allow that, others do. There's been recent legislation based upon input from people like Karen and Steve called the Homeowners Insurance Reform Act of 2013. There are some good things that are happening with your legislators, and they've enacted laws where there are certain things that you might want to touch base with your adjusters on in the very near future, because certain things are going to be in place effective January of 2014 that require them to pay a set amount on your on your contents claim up front, up to 30%. So if any of you have gotten payments of 10, 15, 20, 30,000, they're actually going to be required to pay 30% of your limit. And in this example, if we had $500,000 for your dwelling A, 75% of that is $325. 30% of that up front is $112,000, $112,500. That's what they will be giving on a total loss. The law will require that they actually issue that payment as an advance in negotiation with the insured. Okay, so it can be up to it can be 30% or more actually. So you might want to jot that down. It's a very important law that's going into effect in January. But here there are certain things that they've requested, like the original cost. Steve mentioned it has nothing to do with your claim. What's important is, what does it cost to replace that item? And how you got it is of no significance either. If you inherited something, if somebody was giving as a gift, if you got it at a garage sale, it doesn't matter. All you want to do is properly capture your claim with the replacement cost, and you want to be able to support the replacement cost that you put. And you also want to be able to support the ACV that you assess, and your ACV is based on the depreciation that you apply. But we say be proactive and set those amounts rather than having the carrier do that. And then, discuss differences. This is an example where here's a list where we've worked with an insured, and we do have an ACV column, we do have a depreciation column, and we do have the depreciation amount. So much like what Steve did, when you submit that, that's what goes to the carrier, and you're basically telling the carrier, here's what we believe we ought to get on an ACV basis. Have them tell you why that's not appropriate. Steve mentioned where you shop matters, and it does. If you typically purchase things at a Walmart or a Kmart, then list that as the price, or use that as the method in which you price your replacement. But if you shop at a Macy's or a Dillard's or a Gap, that should be the price point for you. If you shop typically at Neiman Marcus or Nordstrom or Nordstrom's or Williams-Sonoma, that should be the pricing that you use. And the carrier should not price things or expect you or demand that you accept things priced online or on sale. That's not appropriate. We go over it again and again. They don't really define it in the policy. They may define it in some of the pages that they send you on the renewal and some of the changes they make. But RCV is replacement cost, less depreciation equals ACV. And the carrier, I don't believe, should just apply depreciation based on an age of an item alone. If this is 10 years old and they give it a 10-year depreciate or a useful life, they're basically saying they're not going to pay anything to you for this until you replace it, and that's just wrong. Ask them where they got their useful life sheet, or they're going to say it's an internal policy perhaps, but they need to share with you how they came up with their useful life or the age of their items. Part of the new Reform Act that's going to be enacted will require that they provide you, upon request, with the methodology on how they depreciated items. But again, there's much more than age. Quality, age, and condition. Karen has shared as well. If you have something that's 10 years old, but it has been properly stored in a container and never used but more than once, you can't dispute that it's 10 years old, but I don't think they can dispute that the depreciation shouldn't be more than 5 or 10% versus 80% that we've seen on a number of items. So apply the depreciation that you believe is appropriate and have them tell you why it's not. Another few tips on supporting your claim. Karen has done this as well. Photos and receipts, to the extent that you have them. Folks, if you don't have it, you can't provide it. But if you can turn to family and friends, if you have an iPhone, if you have computers, if you have video or anything that helps you support your claim, assists you in putting your claim together, then use it. Gift registry as well. You had shared that. You go to a gift registry, a store, somewhere that you typically shop, scan the items that you lost, you have that printout, that can be used to support your claim. Coverage options. Steve hit upon this. If you have a spa, if you have cabinets, if you have window coverings, and you have available coverages in certain areas, use it to your advantage and ask the carrier politely to say, can I get coverage extended here? If your coverage is out on coverage A and you have available coverage under personal property, get some of those items moved. It's certainly worth a request, and I believe it's appropriate to do. Tax and shipping, he hit on this as well. There's also installation charges. So figure out what it is that's going to cost to replace everything that you lost, and you can add tax and shipping at the end. Sometimes a carrier will provide you with a printout, and they'll have tax on every line, but make sure that they apply the appropriate tax rate as well. We've seen many where the tax rate is not appropriate, and it's a big difference. You wouldn't think that you would need to remind them of that, but again, your claim, be responsible for your claim and hold them accountable. Karen mentioned there are a couple of organizations that are out there that are available to assist people put their contents claim together, and Servio is one of them, Claims Plus is another. We've seen where these organizations will assist the insured, but oftentimes they're retained by the carrier. Some of you may be working with Servio or Claims Plus reps now, and I've had good and not so good experiences with both. If they're retained by the carrier, typically what happens is they'll submit the claim, or as they believe it, to the carrier for approval before you see it. But we've worked with some people that are quite knowledgeable, and they can assist you in pricing your contents or coming up with ideas to help you capture everything that you lost. But there's also an example. This is an Servio depreciation guide that we have in our possession, and it clearly identifies, you can't really make this out, but on this page are items that have 0% depreciation. Karen had mentioned some of them as well. Antiques, food items, collectibles, sports memorabilia, and the like should have no depreciation. But we get a list back from Servio that depreciates these very items by up to 80%. So that's not to your advantage, so make sure that it's your claim, and if they're doing that, then you want to call them on that. Finally, appraisal. Appraisal is a dispute resolution mechanism that's specified in the policy. If you have a claim, for example, that is, your RCV claim is $600,000 and the carrier's RCV is $400,000, you've got a significant issue, a significant difference, and you want to be able to resolve that. And you want to resolve it without spending a heck of a lot of money to do it, because if it's your claim and you can support that it's $600,000, somebody's not playing fair. Is it you or the carrier? Chances are it's going to be the carrier. make sure that you guys do the right thing by submitting an appropriate claim. But in appraisal, you have the opportunity to retain an appraiser, carrier will retain an appraiser, and then the two appraisers will select an umpire, and the umpire is the judge, if you will, and he will, try to resolve whatever differences that the two appraisers are unable to resolve on their own. But the appraiser for you will try to come up with what it is that he believes or she believes the value of your claim is. Carrier will do the same thing, and without having to go to litigation, you can hopefully resolve the claim. But it's something to be aware of. There are no time limits on that, even though some carriers have suggested that there are time limits in demanding appraisal. But it's really, if you reach a significant difference that you can't resolve with your adjuster, you might think about demanding appraisal, and it too is in the policy. And I'll just close with, know your policy, use it to your advantage, communications with your carrier, and make a detailed inventory and be able to support that. You want to be able to meet with them and support whatever it is that you put on your claim. And finally, at the end, I'll share a little bit more information with you on this, the Homeowners Insurance Reform Act, because I think that you should benefit from that. It goes into effect in 2014, but there are things that you can ask your carriers about now. And I want to also make sure that one of the things that is in United Policyholders on the website, but also available here, is an appreciation or a useful life depreciation guide. Use that to your advantage as well when you're putting your list together. Grab a handout before you leave, because it'll tell you this table might have a 20-year life, a useful life. See what the carrier suggests that same thing or the useful life is. And if there's a difference, theirs is, they can't support theirs, and it shouldn't be any difference. There shouldn't be a great disparity. And I'll just be able to address whatever questions you guys might have after.
Thank you so much. All right, thank you so much again for sharing that information. So Chris and Steve, come on up. There he is. Steve, Chris, come on back. And then, hey, Carla very, very graciously offered to be our microphone transportation person. Thank you, Carla. That's on 2. So I think we're going to take our Q&A to 8, and then we'll run about, we started about 15 late, we'll run about 15 over with the breakout sessions with that traffic. So if you have any questions, and then you can either direct it, or we'll just see who wants to answer.
Hi, Chris. I have a question in regards to, we have a loss that happened in this calendar year, and you're trying to say that there's changes in legislation that goes into effect in January. I don't believe that our legislature is so gracious to do it retroactively. So how can we take advantage of that?
I believe that you just approach your carrier or the adjuster that's handling your claim and tell him or her that you're aware of these changes that are taking place, and they suggest that there's no prejudice to them, even though they would suggest perhaps that there would, but to extend those benefits to you at this time. You've lost everything. I mean, and I will provide you with a copy of, or I can give you a site for the Colorado revised statutes that identify exactly those changes that are going to be taking place.
So it's a sympathy play.
Pardon me?
So it's a sympathy play.
Well, but I also think, I mean, it's going to go in effect. There's no doubt. And because of the catastrophic fires that have taken place in this state in the last 3 years and the flooding, gosh, if you got a carrier that says, you know what, we feel for you, but we're not doing anything, put it in writing. But, put something in writing to them. Make the request in writing and have them say no. But the worst they're going to say is no. Use it to your advantage, though.
May I address that for a minute? One way that when we presented for HB 1224, which is the legislation you're talking about, I bugged everyone I knew in the state and finally got the name of the lobbyist for our carrier. I called the lobbyist. He's like, how did you get this number? Introduced myself and said, I have your number. We need to talk. Now, it didn't change us because we had to go through the legislation, but I will tell you, whoever your carrier is, I would keep calling and calling and calling and still calling. Senator Lambert, who is very good, is the state senator. I would certainly kind of just keep going through every one of those avenues and say, this is what we're asking for. It's going to go into effect in 90 days. Why are you being so belligerent? It might be worth it.
Let me address a couple things on SB 1224 as well. There is a provision in there that is retroactive, and that is the right to sue. So that goes back to state statute now. And so, again, hopefully you don't get to that point, but if you can document a body of evidence where they haven't been fair, and that was my buzzword. I stuck that in my emails. This is unfair. it's unreasonable, it's unprofessional. It's those kinds of things. But I use Outlook, and what I was able to do is I had so many emails. As I said, instead of taking one email, I would make 25 emails. But what I was able to do then is go back in and search that word unfair, and I was able to find all those, and then I printed all those out. So that's one piece. The second is that many insurance companies have adopted by policy the provisions, some of the provisions in 1224 anyway. So as Chris said, it doesn't hurt to ask, because if they've adopted that by policy, they may pay something.
Hi, my name is Jill. I'm a partial loss victim, and one of the things that crossed my mind, especially when I was reading the contents estimate, there's depreciation on labor. And how can you depreciate labor? I was updating my kitchen, so the granite's new, the sink is new, the stove is new, the microwave's new, all this stuff is new. And everything they clean in the house is labor. Can you explain that to me?
There should be no depreciation on labor. Are you saying you incurred this cost already, or is it an estimate?
No, that's what they used to pay it out.
An estimate, or they did it?
They did it.
They should pay you the full amount of that invoice. Period.
The soft contents adjuster did his estimate, and in his estimate, because I just got it, in his estimate, he combined it with a separate contractor that I hired for soft contents, but he depreciated everything.
I don't believe that's appropriate, and I'd be happy to discuss it with you after, but if you have incurred costs, they need to pay the incurred costs.
Well, that was the claim.
Unfair, unreasonable, unprofessional.
Oh, yes, and I did do that. And if I might ask another question, if anyone minds. I'm having a very difficult problem with my insurance company, being fair, professional, and I'm in this situation where now I'm being told that because the hygienist did not find any of the 5 elements of a wildfire in my home, that my claim is not really viable.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would need to know where you were in proximity to the fire, but I mean, to me, if you have soot, ash, smoke in your home and you can solidify that, there's no reason they should deny the claim. Did you bring in the hygienist, or did the carrier bring in the hygienist?
The carrier did, and they instructed him only to check for combustibles. And the issue mainly was smoke. And when I asked him, was he going to do an air test, he said, no, I didn't find out until yesterday that he was instructed only to do combustibles, soot, ash, and char. And my radius was 1 to 10 miles from the fire. And so the insurance company asked me today, why did my house suffer so much smoke damage compared to my other people around me? And I told him, I don't know. But this is what I have. And so they're putting the burden on me to bring in someone to do an air quality test and a carbon test, because every smoke detector is going off, and you can see that it's on there. And I change my batteries every year in May. So they're talking, they're beeping from the attic to the basement, and they're putting all of these costs on me to prove it was smoke or wildfire damage. So they said, since it doesn't fall in that category, it's not that. So now I don't know what to do with it.
I would say my own gut feeling to that is I would hire my own expert to come in and, you know what I'm saying, your own hygienist, prepare a report and then submit that cost as a cost of claim, a claims cost under ALE. If they're placing you in the position to defend that claim and are saying you need to provide this, if they're requiring that of you to pay that claim out, I would, again, go go get your own expert to prepare an independent assessment, submit the cost of that as ALE, and move forward. And what other information do you have? Again, are you logging your, I would say that our smoke detectors are going off. Take some video, I'm saying, all of those things.
I am bombarding them through Dora with paperwork of everything. I am a disabled vet. I'm on a fixed income. I cannot go and hire a hygienist. The only reason they brought one in is because I ended up in the ER.
Where's the news? Is there a reporter that could, you're a disabled vet, and this is the attitude and the positioning that's being taken? I don't know, is there, I know where I live, there's the guy you call, the consumer advocacy reporter who gets on that. So I don't know, does anybody have that person's name and number here? Because that sounds horrible. I would just say use all means at your disposal. And again, the best is, again, get an independent expert to document that, submit it as a claims cost under ALE, and/or what other information do you have? Again, those smoke alarms going off, that's not typical.
I'm sorry. Excuse me. They sent a new adjuster out, and they said that my contractor, because the house had already been cleaned, and they went to the basement and said they wiped one of the furnaces and came up with black on their hand, and they had a cum sponge, and I could tell they wiped the stud because it's unfinished, and it was black. But the manager at the carrier that I spoke with today said, "Oh, that can be anything." But the hygienist said that he doesn't believe in sponges, and and that there's no smoke in my house.
And here we'll have Carrie, who's our partial loss Waldo Canyon fire survivor, offer some her insight.
Well, I've been talking with Jill all along, but I'm just curious, could we see a show of hands of how many people here are dealing with similar issues with partial loss? I just want to say that there doesn't seem to be, and I'm curious what Chris's experience is, there doesn't seem to be, the hygienist that can be trusted in town to do a thorough and fair investigation. And many people have used many different hygienists, and you will hear, stories of, well, so-and-so was great, but I paid them out of my pocket. So-and-so wasn't so great when the insurer was the one who paid them because they determined the type of testing that was going to be done. UP is in the process right now of flushing out some hygienists that have been very reliable in past fires in other states to be used as resources. And I know Matrix has also offered some examples of companies that you might consider. But like with everything else, you have to do due diligence and understand what the testing is. What are the parameters? If they're testing for carbon particles in the air 4 months later, after your house has been vacuumed, they're not going to find it because it's heavier than air. If they're testing for off-gassing chemicals, they may in fact find, and that may be the culprit. I'm not a scientist, I'm not saying that, I'm just using that as an example.
How about if we commit on Monday, the 21st of October, at our Mentor Connections meeting, we will have a table dealing with partial loss with this particular issue, and we'll work together to find a professional to be there that night. So Monday, the 21st of October, it's going to be at the Pinery, and we will make sure to have a round table on partial loss with this particular issue.
I think that would be awesome. I'm not sure we can flush out all of the references and everything by the 21st, but I sure hope we can. And we are planning on doing a full forum on partial loss because this is such a difficult thing. And how do you move back into your home if it's making you sick? Do you have any recommendations does the county have any recommendations about what else can be done to raise awareness and to get the insured to agree to extend ALE to have time to do these things?
It's a tough issue, Carrie. again, I think that this is an issue that's being fleshed out, and it's a really, really rough one. So I think the strategies that you're talking about right now, Commissioner Littleton, which is pulling the partial loss survivors together to share information and to leverage resources and to pull together so you're not all out there kind of floating, fighting these individual battles. You can pull together. You see sometimes the partials will do this, or pardon me, the totals will do this on an issue all of them are having. You know, I think that that's a good strategy. So it's a tough one. I don't think that there's going to be anybody who's got a magic wand on it, unfortunately, is what I'm trying to say. That's, as Carrie was pointing out, that's the real challenge. Do you have any other words of advice, Chris, I mean, that you would put out there?
Not really, but I mean, I think that you're doing the right thing. You've got to solidify this in writing and tell them about the health concerns. Okay, with Dora or with your carrier or with both? Okay, but you filed it, you submitted it to the carrier, they know? Okay, well, I can't see where they're going to have a good leg to stand on, but I've seen carriers do stranger things.
Yeah, and remember too, you know, if you're not getting the response that you think is right, fair, or, you know, in these circumstances, go up and over. It sounds like you've already willed Endora, which is a really useful resource. How about going up above? All right, and then if that you're still not getting an appropriate response that takes into consideration the serious health concerns that you're voicing, go up another level. And again, you know, I mean, you're somebody who's extremely, I mean, a disabled veteran, keep going up until you get to somebody's desk who will take a look at that. Do you know what I'm saying? Which is a frustrating process. All right, good job. Yeah, Ms. Anna.
I'm from Wilder Canyon. I'm a partial loss survivor also. And it took me 1 year and 1 month for farmers to give me settlement. So this is a marathon. It's a long, long road ahead. Don't give up. Keep writing what they said that was stuck in your head. Make it documented, because at the end, the compilation of the 100 emails, like Steve said, is going to speak a volume. Make sure you try to meet the people in the same situation, hopefully in the same insurance companies that is treated badly. Yeah, try to connect with the people, because in Wilder Canyon fires, we had about 2 dozen people who were farmers, partial loss. Farmers seem to do really well with total loss people. They settled well. They didn't really have a lot of complaints. But partial loss, they said, "Oh, your house is standing. Nothing is wrong. It didn't burn. Well, what you talking about, air quality? It's nothing wrong." So we had to, as a group, push them month and month and month on. And we even, at the end, interviewed many, as a group, lawyers, because we were going to sue them, because we had only 1 year to sue at that point, because the law was not in effect. So we were going to go sue, and then they changed their mind at the end that they didn't want it to be sued. I don't know exactly what they did, but number of people spoke to high above. They are fixing everything we asked for inside and outside, exterior. Well, it was a lot of work with the group of people who were in the same situation, and a number of people called high above. And we went to Dora, we went to politicians, we went to a number of people, and keep pushing them that we're not happy and they're not making sense, and they are not satisfactorily solving the problem. So it may not solve now, and you may need to provide a lot more information, but don't give up. It may take years to resolve, but that's my experience. So, oh yes, yeah, keep doing that.
All right, you guys, we're going to go to our breakout sessions right now. Anybody who has any questions, all three of us nobody's going anywhere, so we're all staying here. Oh, do we have one last one? Is that what I'm hearing? Okay, go for it, you guys. Let's hit one last one, and then let's go to our breakout sessions, but everybody's staying. So anybody who also has a question, that will not go unanswered. Go for it, my friend.
Just real quick, we've done 3 tests on our house. one of the tests by the insurance company, we actually called the lab that did the test to the insurance company, had them dig deeper into the samples, and they had already said the house was safe. So right now our A&L is being paid by us until we get this settled. But we now know that we have high levels of fiberglass in our home, some of it which is burnt from the other houses that were burning next to us. So you got to keep digging. You really have to keep digging. And now we're having all three, we're working on getting two of the other companies to confirm the same stuff, so we'll have a lot of ammunition when we get there.
I mean, and I think just you guys continuing to just join forces as a partial loss survivor community is a really important strategy. Are you okay? I hear you, Carla. One more time, yes. Let's do it. Then we're going to go to our breakouts. Thank you,
Back
Carla.
on contents, could you give me some advice on how I would file for some contents that are in the same category? For example, we had a total loss. I probably had 150 drill bits, different ages, different sizes, and everything. How do I file on something like that?
There's a couple. Do you want to take it?
I'll tell you, I do.
There's a couple ways. You certainly could go out and price a set of drill bits. You know, they come in sets of 30 or whatever. Or you could price them out one at a time. See, you are the only one that knows when you bought them. For example, if you bought a skill saw, right? You probably would have a series of different saw blades, but you probably didn't buy them at the same time. And what I found was, again, in my case, there were very few instances where I lumped things together. So as soon as you asked that question, drill bits came to my mind, right? If it was me, I walked in with my cell phone, and I went in places like Lowe's and Home Depot and Whole Foods, and finally the guys at King Soopers are like, "What are you doing?" You know? And once I told them, they're like, "Can I help?" You know? But instead of pricing them out as a set, I would say, you know, it depends. At some point, you're like, "I'm tired," you know? It's easy to get run down. But see, I'm Angry Stevie, so, you know, I'm Irish, man. So I decided, hey, for me, I'm going to price them out one at a time.
Okay. You price them out one at a time, and the limit is blank, or you group them for an average price, and you're coming pretty damn close. Consider lumping them together if you can actually do it. There's nothing wrong with this. Steve had a little more time on his hand than I thought, but that's the proper way. But there's nothing inappropriate about grouping them at all.
Let me just add one thing to that too, and you know, I don't think any of us could undervalue this thought, which Steve was just kind of ending with there, is I think everybody here has got a different tolerance for this process, right? And some people are going to be able to take it to the nitty-gritty and right to the nth degree, and God bless, is what I say about that. But you may not have that level of just, you know, patience, or just, you might just be like, I've had it, you know, I'm now reaching the end of my operating day on this. And in the end, you know, I would urge none of you to sacrifice your mental health. That's more important than money. And so I think it's important to, you know, even though some people have done amazing, great detailed jobs, and that's a wonderful strategy, I don't want anybody feeling like, oh gosh, if I don't go to the nth degree and collect every last penny, somehow you failed. Everybody's got a different tolerance level. And so be true to yourself, and you might just be at a certain point, I'm out. And if you're out, you're out, and there's nothing wrong with it. This is your claim, it's your money, it's your life. And so, like I said, there's a whole range of tolerance levels. So just be true and hold true to that. You guys, we're going to go to our breakout sessions because we're over. And all three of us are here. And we're going to go ahead. Carrie, do you have our signs? Yes, we do. So we're going to break up. We're going to be holding out. So we're done with our taping. Thank you very much to the county for